The 19-year-old alien princess mocked the human soldier, then took off her armor and left silently. The space station Nexus 7 floated in the darkness between three star systems. It was built for meetings like this one. The station was huge, with white walls and bright lights everywhere. Ships from dozens of different worlds were docked to its sides like metal flowers on a giant stem. Inside the main hall, aliens from across the galaxy gathered for the most important peace talks in 100 years. The air hummed with translator devices, working hard to change thousands of different languages into something everyone could understand. Princess Zixara stepped off her ship with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. She was 19 years old, but she moved like a predator. Her people, the Velter, were famous throughout the galaxy as the best warriors anyone had ever seen. They were tall and thin, with 4 arms that moved faster than most people could even see. Their skin was silver blue, and their eyes were completely black. Zixara wore the ceremonial armor of her people. It was made from metal that seemed to flow like water, changing color from blue to purple as she walked. 3 of her best guards walked behind her. Each guard was a master fighter who could take on 20 normal soldiers and win. "Your Highness," said Ambassador Krell, a fat green alien who ran the peace talks. "Welcome to Nexus 7. We are honored to have the Velter Empire join these important discussions." Zixara looked around the hall with sharp eyes. She saw the representatives from the rock people of Granite Prime, sitting like living mountains. She saw the bird folk from the cloud worlds, their feathers shining in the light. She saw the merchants from the trade rings, counting their profits on small screens. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "The Velter are here. We will make sure these talks stay safe and organized." Ambassador Krell's green face looked worried. "Actually, Your Highness, we already have security arranged. The human delegation has provided protection for all the peace talks." Zixara stopped walking. Her forearms went very still. "Humans," she said the word like it tasted bad. "You chose humans to protect the most important meeting in galactic history. The humans have proven themselves very capable," Ambassador Krell said. "Quickly, they have experience in keeping peace during difficult negotiations." Zixara laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Humans are slow. They are weak. They can barely see in proper light, and they break if you push them too hard. What kind of protection can such soft creatures provide?" From across the hall, a voice answered her. "The kind that works, Your Highness." Everyone turned to look. A human man walked toward them. He was not very tall, maybe reaching Zixara's shoulder. His hair was black and cut short. His uniform was simple, just dark blue with some small metal decorations. He moved quietly, like he was trying not to bother anyone. "Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen," the human said, stopping a respectful distance away. "United Earth Marine Corps. I'm in charge of security for these talks." Zixara stared at him. She had seen humans before, but never this close. They really were strange creatures. His skin was dark brown, and he only had 2 arms. His eyes were brown too, and they looked tired but alert. He was probably about 28 years old, which was still young for most species, but practically middle-aged for short-lived humans. "You?" Zixara asked. "You are supposed to protect us." "Yes, ma'am," Chen said calmly. "My team and I will make sure everyone stays safe during the negotiations." Zixara walked in a circle around Chen, looking at him like he was a broken machine she was trying to understand. "How fast can you run?" "Human fast enough," Chen replied. "How quick are your reflexes?" "Quick enough." Zixara stopped in front of him. "Show me." Before Chen could answer, one of Zixara's forearms moved. It shot out toward Chen's face faster than lightning, but the punch stopped just inches from his nose. Chen had not moved at all. He just stood there, looking at her. Calmly. "Interesting," Zixara said. "You did not even try to block my attack. Are you so slow that you could not see it coming?" "I saw it coming," Chen said. "I also saw that you were going to stop before hitting me." "How could you know that?" Chen looked directly into her black eyes. "Because you're not here to hurt anyone, Your Highness. You're here to help make peace." Zixara felt something strange in her chest. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Most people were afraid of her. Others tried to impress her. But this human just stood there like her speed and strength meant nothing to him. Humans, she said loudly so everyone in the hall could hear, are the most primitive species in the known galaxy. They cannot fly without machines. They cannot breathe in most atmospheres. They live for such a short time that they barely learn anything before they die. And yet, somehow, the Great Galactic Council thinks these weak creatures can protect us. Many of the alien delegates stopped their conversations to watch. The bird folk ruffled their feathers nervously. The rock people turned their heavy heads to see what was happening. Chen said nothing. He just waited. Zixara stepped closer to him. I have been trained in combat since I was 5 years old. I can move 3 times faster than any human. My reflexes are so quick I can catch bullets from primitive weapons. I have studied 17 different forms of martial arts from across the galaxy. What training do you have? Human. Enough, Chen said simply. Enough, Zixara's voice got louder. That is your answer. Enough. She moved into a fighting stance, her forearms spreading out like the points of a star. Then she began to move through a combat form from her homeworld. Her arms flowed like water, striking and blocking at targets that only she could see. She moved so fast that her arms looked like silver blurs in the station's lights. The other aliens watched in amazement. Even the rock people, who were hard to impress, made rumbling sounds of respect. Zixara was beautiful and deadly, like a storm made of metal and grace. When she finished, she was not even breathing hard. Now you try, human. Show me these fighting skills that make you worthy to protect the great species of the galaxy. Chen looked around at all the aliens watching him. He could feel their doubt and curiosity. Then he looked back at Zixara. Maybe later, Your Highness, he said quietly. Right now, I have work to do. And with that, he turned and walked away. Zixara stood there, her mouth open in shock. No one had ever dismissed her like that. No one had ever treated her demonstrations of skill like they were not important. For the first time in her life, Princess Zixara of the Velter Empire felt truly curious about another species. And she did not like the feeling at all. 3 days passed on Nexus 7. The peace talks continued in the big meeting rooms. But Princess Zixara could not stop thinking about the human sergeant. Every time she saw Marcus Chen walking through the station's halls, she felt annoyed. He did his job quietly. When alien delegates argued too loudly, Chen would appear nearby, not saying anything, just standing there until they calmed down. When someone got lost in the station's maze of corridors, Chen would help them find their way. When technical problems happened with the translation machines, Chen worked with the repair teams to fix them quickly. But he never talked to Zixara. He never tried to impress her or prove himself. When she walked past him, he would nod politely and continue with his work. This made her more angry than any insult could have. On the 4th morning, Zixara decided she had enough. She found Chen in the security office, looking at screens that showed every part of the station. He was drinking something hot from a small cup, coffee, she thought humans called it. Sergeant Chen, she said, walking into the room with her forearms crossed. Chen looked up from his screens. Good morning, Your Highness. Is there something I can help you with? Yes, Zixara said. You can stop pretending to be something you are not. Chen put down his coffee cup. I'm not sure what you mean. You act like you belong here, Zixara said, stepping closer to his desk. You act like humans have earned the right to protect the great species of the galaxy. But you have never proven this. You have never shown that your people deserve this. Honor, we're not here to prove anything, Chen said calmly. We're here to do a job. Exactly, Zixara pointed one of her long fingers at him. You avoid every chance to show your skills. You run away from challenges. This proves that humans are cowards. Chen stood up slowly. He was shorter than Zixara, but something in his brown eyes made him seem bigger. What do you want, Your Highness? Zixara smiled, showing her sharp white teeth. I want to invoke the trial of worthiness. The room became very quiet. Even the humming of the computers seemed to stop. The trial of worthiness is an ancient tradition of my people, Zixara explained. When someone claims to be a warrior but has not proven themselves, they can be challenged to 3 tests. If they pass all 3 tests, their worthiness is accepted by all who witness it. If they failed, she shrugged. Then everyone knows the truth. Chen looked at her for a long moment. And if I refuse? Then everyone will know that humans are cowards. The other delegates are already wondering why such a weak species was chosen to protect them. Your refusal would confirm their doubts. Chen picked up his coffee cup and took a sip. The hot liquid seemed to help him think. Finally, he set the cup down and looked directly at Zixara. All right, he said. I accept your challenge. 2 hours later, a crowd had gathered in the station's main training area. Word about the trial of worthiness had spread quickly. Aliens from dozens of different worlds came to watch. They filled the observation deck above the training floor, chattering in their various languages. Ambassador Crow looked very worried. Your Highness, perhaps we should postpone this until after the peace talks are finished? No, Zixara said firmly. The trial happens now. She had changed into her combat gear, a tight-fitting suit that moved with her body like a second skin. Her forearms were free to move, and her black eyes gleamed with excitement. Chen stood on the other side of the training area. He had also changed clothes, wearing simple gray exercise clothing. He looked calm, but Zixara could see tension in his shoulders. The first trial, Zixara announced to the crowd, test speed and agility. The training room's computer created a holographic obstacle course. It was designed for Velter. Physiology, tall barriers to leap over, narrow spaces to squeeze through, and moving platforms that require perfect timing to cross. The challenge is simple. Zixara said, complete the course as fast as possible. I will go first to show you how it should be done. She stepped up to the starting line. The computer beeped, and she exploded into motion. Zixara moved like liquid lightning. Her forearms helped her balance as she leaped over barriers twice her height. She twisted through narrow gaps without slowing down. When moving platforms tried to knock her off course, she used them like stepping stones. Her reflexes so quick that she seemed to predict where they would be before they got there. She finished the course in 37 seconds. The watching aliens made sounds of amazement and respect. Even the rock people, who rarely showed emotion, rumbled their approval. Your turn, human, Zixara said, breathing only slightly harder than normal. Chen walked to the starting line. He looked at the obstacle course, studying each barrier and platform. Then he nodded to himself. The computer beeped. Chen began to run. He was much slower than Zixara. That was obvious immediately. Where she had leaped over barriers, he had to climb them. Where she had twisted through narrow gaps, he had to turn sideways and squeeze through carefully. But something strange happened as the watching aliens continued to observe. Chen was not trying to copy Zixara's methods. Instead, he found his own ways to overcome each obstacle. When he reached a barrier too high to jump over, he used his momentum to run up its side and grab the top edge. When moving platforms tried to knock him down, he timed his movements to use their force to push him forward instead of fighting against them. At one point, Chen surprised everyone by sliding under a barrier instead of going over it. At another, he swung from hanging cables that Zixara had ignored completely. Chen finished the course in 59 seconds. He was breathing hard and had sweat on his forehead, but he had completed it. Acceptable, Zixara said, though she sounded a little less confident than before. The second trial tests combat reflexes. The holographic system created a battle simulation. Virtual enemies would attack from all directions, and the goal was to survive as long as possible while defeating as many opponents as possible. I will demonstrate first, Zixara said. She stepped into the simulation zone. Immediately, holographic warriors appeared around her, some with swords, some with energy weapons, all moving to attack. Zixara was magnificent. Her forearms moved like a deadly dance, blocking attacks and striking back faster than the eye could follow. She spun and twisted, never staying in one place long enough for enemies to surround her. Energy bolts passed through the space where she had been a split second before. She lasted 8 minutes and defeated 43 opponents before the simulation finally overwhelmed her. The watching crowd cheered and clapped their various appendages. "Beat that, human," Zixara said, her eyes glowing with pride. Chen entered the simulation zone. The holographic enemies appeared, just as many and just as dangerous. Chen's approach was completely different. Where Zixara had been pure speed and aggression, Chen was cautious and strategic. He moved less but thought more. He used cover when he could find it. He made enemies get in each other's way. When two holographic warriors attacked him at once, Chen stepped aside and let them crash into each other. When energy bolts came at him, he used fallen enemies as shields. He was not as fast as Zixara, but he was smarter about when and where to move. Chen lasted 6 minutes and defeated 31 opponents. Not as good as Zixara's performance, but better than most aliens could do. Interesting, Zixara admitted as Chen stepped out of the simulation zone. "You fight like you think too much." "Maybe," Chen said, wiping sweat from his face. "What's the third trial?" Zixara smiled. And this time her smile was not kind. "The third trial is the most important. It tests not what you can do, but who you really are." She looked around at all the watching aliens, then back at Chen. "The third trial tests a warrior's honor and judgment. And I promise you, human, this is one test you cannot win." The crowd of alien delegates had grown even larger. Word about the trial of worthiness had spread throughout Nexus 7, and beings from every corner of the galaxy wanted to watch. They filled the observation deck, hanging from the ceiling supports, and even floating in the air if they had that ability. Ambassador Krell looked more nervous than ever. His green skin had turned pale, and he kept wiping sweat from his forehead with a small cloth. "Your Highness, perhaps we should consider no delays," Princess Zixara said sharply. "The third trial will happen now." She walked to the center of the training area, her forearms moving gracefully as she spoke to the watching crowd. "The final trial is the most important. Any creature can be fast, any animal can fight, but only true warriors possess honor and wisdom." Chen stood quietly nearby, still catching his breath from the combat simulation. His gray exercise clothes were dark with sweat, but his brown eyes remained calm and alert. "The third trial," Zixara continued, "tests judgment under pressure. It shows what kind of choices a warrior makes when everything is at stake." The training room's computer hummed to life. The holographic systems activated, and suddenly Chen and Zixara found themselves standing in a completely different place. They were in a space station corridor, but not like the clean, bright halls of Nexus 7. This station was old and damaged. The walls were cracked. Sparks flew from broken electrical systems, and red emergency lights flashed everywhere. The air smelled of smoke and burning metal. "Computer simulation, emergency scenario 77 Alpha," announced a mechanical voice. "Objective, station critical failure in progress. Fire spreading through all sectors. Total evacuation time remaining 18 minutes. Secondary objective, secure critical data files from central computer before evacuation." Zixara smiled confidently. "A simple rescue operation. Watch and learn, human." The simulation filled the corridors with people who needed help. Aliens of every description ran through the halls in panic. Some were injured and moved slowly. Others carried children or elderly family members. A few had stopped moving altogether, too scared or hurt to continue. "Begin simulation," the computer announced. Zixara immediately started moving with purpose and efficiency. She quickly studied the station layout on a nearby computer terminal, calculating the fastest routes to reach the most people. Her forearms allowed her to help multiple aliens at once, carrying to while guiding to others. She moved through the station like a perfectly programmed machine. When she found a group of injured aliens, she quickly checked each one, helped those who could be saved, and moved on from those who would take too much time. When she reached areas with the most people, she organized them into efficient evacuation groups. Zixara to evacuation teams, she called into her communication device. "I have secured Quarter 7 with 43 civilians, moving to Quarter 5 next." She was magnificent to watch. Every movement had purpose, every decision. was logical. She never wasted a second or took unnecessary risks. Chen took a completely different approach. While Zixar had studied the station layout, Chen had knelt down next to an elderly alien who had fallen in the corridor. The old being was hurt and couldn't walk fast, but Chen carefully helped him stand and supported his weight. "It's okay," Chen said gently. "I've got you. We're going to get out of here together." The old alien species was one Chen had never seen before, small and gray with 6 legs and large eyes. Moving with him was slow and difficult, but Chen never left his side. As they walked through the burning station, Chen found more people who needed extra help. A family of small aliens, whose children were too frightened to move, an injured worker who had been forgotten in a damaged room, a group of visitors who didn't know the station layout and were completely lost. Chen helped them all. Chen to anyone listening. He spoke into his communication device. "I've found a safe room in Section 12, bringing a group of injured civilians here for temporary shelter," where Zixar moved quickly between large groups. Chen spent long minutes with individuals who needed special care. Where she calculated the maximum number of saves possible, he focused on making sure no one was left behind. The computer counted down the remaining time, 14 minutes until station destruction. Zixar had reached the central computer room. The critical data files were stored here, information that could prevent wars and save millions of lives across the galaxy. She quickly began the download process while continuing to coordinate rescue efforts. Evacuation teams, this is Zixara. Central data download in progress. Continue civilian evacuation to emergency pods. At the same time, Chen was in a damaged section of the station that most people had already left. He had heard sounds, weak calls for help from behind a collapsed wall. It would take precious time to dig through the debris, time that could be used to save others. Chen started digging, 12 minutes until station destruction. Zixar finished downloading the critical data and headed back toward the evacuation zones, helping more civilians along the way. Her efficiency was perfect. Every choice she made saved the maximum number of lives possible. Chen finally broke through the debris and found 3 aliens trapped underneath, a maintenance worker and 2 engineers, who had been trying to fix the station's life support systems when the disaster started. They were all badly hurt. "Can you walk?" Chen asked. "No," gasped one of the engineers. "My legs are broken. Leave me. Save yourselves." "Not happening," Chen said firmly. He looked around and found a piece of metal that could work as a stretcher. "We're all going home today. 8 minutes until station destruction." Chen loaded the injured aliens onto the improvised stretcher and began the long, slow journey to the evacuation pods. The stretcher was heavy and awkward to carry. Other civilians offered to help, but Chen insisted they evacuate themselves first. 6 minutes until station destruction. Zixar reached the evacuation pods with her final group of civilians. She had organized the entire rescue operation with military precision. Her final count was impressive: 847 civilians saved, plus the critical data that could prevent future conflicts. For minutes until station destruction, Chen was still in the damaged corridors, moving as fast as he could while carrying the injured engineers. Other rescue workers had already left the station, but Chen refused to abandon his group. 2 minutes until station destruction. Chen reached the evacuation pods just as the final warning alarms began to sound. He quickly loaded the injured aliens into the last emergency pod and activated the launch sequence. "Simulation complete," announced the computer. The burning station disappeared, and they were back in the training room on Nexus 7. The watching aliens cheered and made sounds of approval for both performances. Zixar stood proudly in the center of the room. Final count: 847 civilians rescued. Critical data secured. Mission completed with maximum efficiency. Chen said nothing. He was breathing hard and looked exhausted. "And you, human?" Zixara asked. "What is your count?" Chen looked up at her with tired eyes. 430 to civilians rescued. No data recovered. The training room became very quiet. The difference in numbers was obvious to everyone. Zixara raised her for arms in victory. I have proven my superiority. The human rescued less than half the people I saved, and he failed to complete the secondary mission entirely. She turned to address the watching crowd. This proves what I have said all along. Humans are inefficient. They make poor choices under pressure. Wait, said a new voice. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. An ancient alien stepped forward from the crowd, older than any being most of them had ever seen. Its species was unknown, its body covered in scales that seemed to shift color with its thoughts. I am Arbiter Thane, the ancient being said. In a voice like whispers of wind, I designed this simulation long ago, based on real events in galactic history, before we declare a winner. Perhaps we should examine what these choices really mean. The Arbiter's old eyes looked first at Zixara, then at Chen, then back at the crowd. Because sometimes, Thane said slowly, the numbers don't tell the whole story. Arbiter Thane moved slowly toward the center of the training room. The ancient alien scales changed from deep blue to silver as it walked, and every being in the crowd watched in respectful silence. Even Princess Zixara lowered her arms and waited to hear what the Arbiter would say. Long ago, Thane began, its voice carrying easily through the large room. I lived through many wars. I saw species destroy each other over misunderstandings. I watched good people make terrible choices because they did not see the full picture. The Arbiter stopped between Chen and Zixara, looking at both of them with eyes that seemed older. Then stars. This simulation you just completed was not created from imagination. It was built from real events, a disaster that happened 67 years ago at Telos Station. A quiet murmur went through the watching crowd. Many of the older aliens recognized the name. Telos Station had been famous throughout the galaxy, but not for good reasons. Your Highness, Thane said, turning to face Zixara, your performance in this simulation was remarkable. You showed exactly the kind of tactical thinking and efficiency that made the Velter famous as warriors. Zixara lifted her chin proudly. Thank you, Arbiter. I acted as any trained warrior should act. Yes, Thane agreed. You did exactly what the Velter rescue teams did at the real Telos Station 67 years ago. They saved 847 civilians and secured the critical data, just as you did. They were celebrated as heroes throughout the galaxy. Chen stood quietly, listening. His breathing had returned to normal, but he still looked tired from the simulation. The Velter teams were praised for their efficiency. Thane continued. Military academies studied their methods. Their rescue operation became the standard way to handle such emergencies, as it should be. Zixara said, efficiency saves lives. Quick thinking prevents disasters. Thane's scale shifted to a darker color, but there was something the Velter teams did not know about the data they recovered. The training room became completely silent. Even the humming of the computers seemed to stop. The critical data files, Thane said slowly, contained false information. They were planted by enemies who wanted to start a war. The intelligence in those files claimed that the peaceful Meridian Alliance was building secret weapons and planning attacks on neutral worlds. Zixara S for arms went very still. False information. Yes, Thane confirmed. The data was designed to look real and important. When galactic leaders received it, they believed it completely. After all, it had been rescued by the famous Velter efficiency teams. Why would such heroes risk their lives for anything that wasn't true? Chen was beginning to understand where the story was going, but he said nothing. The false information led to the Meridian War. Thane continued. 40 years of fighting. Billions of lives lost. Entire planets turned to ash. All because efficient warriors saved data that should have been left to burn. The watching aliens began to murmur among themselves. Some remembered the Meridian War. Others had only heard stories. But everyone knew it had been one of the most terrible conflicts in galactic history. Zixara felt something cold growing in her stomach. But the civilians. We saved 847 civilians. You did, Thane agreed. But let me tell you about the civilians that Sergeant Chen chose to save. The Arbiter turned to face Chen, its ancient eyes studying the quiet human, the elderly alien you helped first, the one who slowed you down so much, was Ambassador Keth of the Meridian Alliance. He was on Telos Station for secret peace talks. The family with frightened children that you spent time comforting. They were the relatives of key negotiators. The maintenance worker you dug out of the debris was actually an undercover intelligence agent who knew the truth about the false data files. Chen's eyes widened slightly. He had not known any of this during the simulation. The injured engineers you carried on that improvised stretcher, Thane continued, were the only people on the station who could have identified the data files as fake. They had been trying to warn security when the disaster started. Zixar's world was beginning to turn upside down. You mean? I mean that every person Sergeant Chen chose to save was someone who could have prevented the war. Thane said, in the real disaster, those people died because the Velter teams followed standard efficiency protocols. They were considered low priority, too slow, too difficult to save. Not worth the extra time. The training room was so quiet that the sound of breathing seemed loud. Ambassador Keth died in the real disaster, Thane continued. Without him, there was no one left to speak for peace with the Meridian Alliance. The families Chen saved? In reality, their deaths enraged the Meridian government and made them more willing to believe the false intelligence, the maintenance worker, and engineers who knew the truth. They died with their knowledge. Zixar stared at Chen with new eyes. But he didn't know. He couldn't have known who those people were. Exactly, Thane said. He saved them not because of their political importance, but because they needed help. He chose compassion over efficiency, individual lives over numerical success. The arbor's scales shifted to a warm golden color. This is what I learned from studying the Telos disaster and many others like it. Warriors who focus only on maximum efficiency often miss the human element, the unpredictable factors that numbers cannot measure. They save data that turns out to be false. They abandon people who turn out to be crucial. Chen finally spoke, his voice quiet but clear. I just tried to help the people who needed help the most, yes. Thane said, in that instinct, that choice to value individual lives over abstract goals is exactly what could have prevented 40 years of war. Zixar felt like her entire understanding of the world was cracking apart. Everything she had been taught about efficiency and superiority suddenly seemed incomplete. But humans are slow, she said weakly. They are weak. They don't have our reflexes or our training. Physical speed is not the only kind of speed that matters. Thane replied, quick reflexes are not the only kind of intelligence that saves lives. Your people have optimized themselves to be perfect warriors, princess. But humans have something different. They have kept their instinct to care about each individual person, even when it seems inefficient. The ancient alien looked around at all the watching delegates. The question this trial was designed to answer is not who can save the most people. The question is who can make the choices that actually matter. Zixar stood in the center of the training room, surrounded by hundreds of aliens. But she had never felt more alone. Her forearms hung at her sides as she tried to process what she had learned. Chen had not won because he was stronger or faster or smarter. He had won because he saw each person as important, not just as numbers in a rescue count. For the first time in her 19 years of life, Princess Zixara of the Velter Empire began to wonder if everything she believed about strength and superiority might be wrong, and that thought scared her more than any enemy she had ever faced. Princess Zixara did not sleep that night. She sat in her private quarters aboard the Velter ship, staring out at the stars through a large window. The peace talks had continued after the trial, but she had not attended any of the meetings. Her mind was too busy trying to understand what Arbor Thane had told her. For 19 years, she had believed that speed and efficiency made the Velter superior to all other species. Her people were the galaxy's finest warriors because they could move faster, think quicker, and fight better than anyone else. This was not just her opinion. It was fact, proven in countless battles across hundreds of years. But now she had learned that this same efficiency had caused one of the worst wars in galactic history. Zixar activated her personal computer and began to search for information about humans, not their technology or their weapons, but their choices. She wanted to understand how such a slow, Weak species had earned respect throughout the galaxy. What she found surprised her. The first file she opened was about a human military unit during the Kepler colony disaster. A deadly plague had spread through the colony, and evacuation ships could only take a limited number of people. The logical choice would have been to save the healthiest colonists, the ones most likely to survive and rebuild elsewhere. But the human commander had made a different decision. He ordered his soldiers to fill the evacuation ships with children, elderly colonists, and the sick. When asked why, he said, "If we can't save the people who need us most, then what kind of people are we?" The commander and most of his unit stayed behind and died when the plague spread. But the colonists they saved went on to establish 3 new worlds that became centers of art, science, and culture. Zixara opened another file. This one was about human peacekeepers during the asteroid belt conflicts. Instead of choosing sides between the mining corporations who were fighting, the humans had focused on protecting civilian workers. They built refugee stations and medical centers. They rescued people from both sides of the conflict. Their actions had been called inefficient by military experts. The humans could have ended the war faster by supporting the stronger side, but instead, they had chosen to minimize suffering for everyone involved. The conflict eventually ended when workers from both corporations realized they had more in common with each other than with their corporate bosses. They formed a new government that brought peace to the entire asteroid belt. File after file showed the same pattern, humans making choices that seemed inefficient or even foolish, but which led to better outcomes in the long run. They consistently chose individual lives over strategic advantages. They chose compassion over conquest. Zixara found records of human soldiers sharing their food with enemy prisoners during wartime. Human doctors treating wounded enemies before treating their own allies. Human negotiators spending months learning about alien cultures before attempting any peace talks. They fight like they care more about their enemies than themselves. She whispered to the empty room. But that wasn't quite right. She realized humans didn't care more about their enemies. They just seemed to believe that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity, even in war. As the station's artificial dawn began to brighten her window, Zixara finally understood what made humans different. They had never forgotten that strength was meant to protect, not to dominate. The Vilter had spent generations perfecting their bodies and their tactics. They had become incredible warriors, but somewhere along the way, they had forgotten why warriors existed in the first place. Humans, despite being slower and weaker, had remembered. 3 hours later, Zixara walked through the corridors of Nexus 7. The peace talks were scheduled to resume soon, but she had something important to do first. She found Marcus Chen in the security office, just as she had several days ago. He was drinking coffee and watching the security monitors, making sure all the delegates were safe. When she entered the room, Chen looked up and started to stand. "Your Highness, good morning. Is there a sit?" Zixara said quietly. "Please." Chen settled back into his chair, watching her carefully. Something in her voice was different from before. Zixara stood in the center of the small office for a long moment, not speaking. Then, slowly, she began to remove her ceremonial armor. Chen's eyes widened. He knew enough about Vilter culture to understand what this meant. First, she removed the arm guards that enhanced her already incredible speed. Then the chest piece that protected her vital organs. Then the leg armor that allowed her to jump impossible distances. Each piece was placed carefully on the floor until she stood before him, wearing only a simple dark blue undersuit in Vilter tradition. Removing one's armor in front of another warrior meant laying down arms in recognition of a superior teacher. It was one of the highest honors her people could give. Zixara knelt on one knee and bowed her head in the formal Vilter gesture of respect. "For a worthy instructor, I understand now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Chen stood up slowly and walked around his desk. He looked down at the princess kneeling before him, at the pile of armor that represented everything her people valued, and he felt the weight of the moment. "Your Highness," he said gently, "you don't need to do this." Zixara raised her head to look at him. Her black eyes were bright with tears. My people have spent so long becoming perfect warriors that we forgot what we were supposed to be fighting for, she said. You showed me that true strength is not about being the fastest or the strongest. It is about remembering that every life has value. Chen reached down and helped her stand. We all have different strengths. Your people's skills have saved countless lives too. But we could save more, Zixara said. We could be better if we learn to see what you see. She turned to leave, but Chen called after her. Your Highness, wait. Zixara stopped and looked back at him. Chen picked up her armor and handed it to her. A true warrior needs their armor. This doesn't belong to me. As she took the armor back, Chen added, but maybe we could learn from each other. Your people's efficiency combined with human compassion. Imagine what we could accomplish together. Zixara smiled for the first time since the trials had begun. It was not the confident, superior smile she had worn before. This was something warmer and more genuine. I will like that very much, Sergeant Chen. 2 days later, the peace talks concluded successfully. The new Galactic Alliance included provisions for joint training programs between human and Velter military units. Princess Zixara had personally requested these programs, saying that her people had much to learn from human approaches to conflict resolution. When the delegates prepared to return to their home worlds, Chen found a message waiting in his quarters. It was written in perfect English, though he knew it had originally been composed in the Velter language. Sergeant Chen, thank you for teaching me that being a warrior is not about proving superiority over others. It is about protecting what matters most. I will carry this lesson back to my people, and perhaps we can become the kind of warriors the galaxy truly needs. With deepest respect and gratitude, Princess Zixara of the Velter Empire. Chen smiled as he read the message. Then he deleted it and prepared for his next assignment. After all, he had work to do.